Welcome back, refiners, and welcome to What Was Hollow. My name is Ebube, and you are listening to Popcorn for Dinner. Now that we're on our first ORTBO, I think it's only fair that we acknowledge everything we do here in this office and how it affects how we're going to operate outside of the office. Relationships are tested, revelations are given, and of course, lies are told, because I think that's just our MO at this point. So in order to parse everything going on, I'm joined by Chinedu and Jerry. And it's going to be a fun time because who doesn't want to run around in the wilderness in winter?
Hi guys, it's good to be back again to discuss the best TV show out at the moment.
You're standing on business on that, right? That's
Yes.
definitely the best TV show.
Absolutely.
What a time to be alive.
I think at least airing right now for sure, and it is making a very strong claim for still airing as in general, even if it's not actively releasing episodes. Well, this one is. But hey kids, what's for dinner? I'm back again, so nice to be here.
Yeah, so I guess, how did you guys just overall feel about not just this episode, but the fact that this episode starts with not reintegrated Mark?
For me, I think it shows the amount of trust I have in the writers and the show, that everything they do, I trust that there's an intentionality to it. Even when they woke up in the snow, I know that something
on the ice. What are the mechanics of that? But anyway, please continue.
No, I mean, I know that obviously we wanted to see a continuation of that. That was such a massive decision that Mark took, but then this show has shown us time again, and I think I'll get to it as well. Just kind of, I think the detriments that the gap between the first season and this season has done to the show, where there's people forgets that this show is as good as this show is.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of that. But yeah, I had full trust in them to execute this perfectly. So
That's interesting. I actually agree with you in full trust, but it took me a few more minutes than it seemingly took you to accept that. And I think even with AJ's text, I think she was more in that camp as well, because when it first happened, I was like you guys remember that when I finished the episode 3, I was like, I'm going straight to 4, because obviously I didn't have to be on the one with you guys. But then I started watching it and I was like, wait, so do I just pause and watch later? But I was like, no, I've started. I want to see where this is going, because what do you mean we're outside and everything seems even creepier and they're not really addressing? I was like, fair enough. Okay, just take it. Mark's reintegrated, and we're just thrust back into the world.
We don't know how much time and run with it. It's like
we don't know how much time
we'll
has
address
passed.
It later.
Just accept it. Because my first thought initially when I saw Irving was, has Mark tried to contact Irv somehow? But then where would Mark get access to the OTC to turn those? So that was very quickly like, okay, so Mark is just a regular day in Lumen. What's going on? What is this about? And then I just went from there, and I liked it.
Yeah, but
I did have questions though. I did have.
What questions?
No, not a lot of questions. As in, it's not like I started watching it and we're in the snow. I was wondering what was happening.
Okay. Of course.
Yeah, it was obviously just random, and I initially thought it was a dream or a nightmare of someone.
I think there was a brief moment where I just had to ask myself, wait, did I miss an episode? Just a very brief moment. But yeah, I was like, nah, these guys, this is like, it's one of those things where you just had to be like, okay, let them cook. Like something is going on here, you know? But speaking of beginnings and Irving, of course, this episode starts and ends with Irving, right? We have the dolly zoom in for when he becomes a Zinnia and the dolly zoom out for when he becomes this Audi. And I guess we might as well just talk about the circumstances in which he becomes his Audi, because as it turns out, we were right. I don't get to say on the internet that much that I was right, but I was right. Chinedu was right too. there was like maybe there were some doubts along the way. I never had any. Okay, I'm just here to stand and say I was right. It's as simple as that. Because wow. Just performances from everybody off the charts. Completely off the charts. Like Britt Lauer, give her the Emmy now. Give her the Emmy yesterday. Like this stuff is just getting out of hand how good the performances are in this show. Because she had to do so much. Right?
Yes.
She had to play Helly. She had to play Helena. Then she had to play Helena pretending to be Helly. And she had to play Helena trying to keep pretending to be Helly while someone is actively trying to kill her. Like,
do you know how insane it is to pull that off, that the audience is fully convinced that, this is not the same character? I mean, yes, I know that she gave us the outdoor scene where she lied about what she saw, but I fully believe that, it's not even just that. We're convinced about who we see on screen.
Honestly, I think what's even harder is and what kind of warrants even more commendation is the fact that people were not sure. Like the fact that sometimes you think it's Helly, sometimes you think it's Helena. Like it's one thing for her to convince us that she's the other person, but it's a complete other thing for us to literally be on the fence. Like people are literally there are articles on the internet as to who is it supposed to be. Like give her the Emmy now. Like let them not annoy me when those awards come. But okay,
it is coming out very early in the season.
It's good for them to establish things like this. This is very Succession season.
Oh no, I meant like
3.
early in award season, as in Severance is in January. So like will they still remember? But they better.
Well,
but that's that as well.
I guess before we get into the rest of it, right, and actually break down the circumstances of Helly supposedly being back now, and I guess how Mark feels about that. The Invincible crew is back, and that is a great thing that I personally am excited about. Definitely go listen to the review of season 3, episode 1, which is pretty crazy. I mean, we know what we're signing up for when it comes to Invincible, so I'm glad that we're in a world where we can choose to either be the good guys or the guys that save the world. And I know who I want to be. You get to decide. So, having said all that now, I think I feel the most this episode for Mark, but I kind of feel like this was a very Irving episode. Chinedu, what do you think?
It definitely was. I mean, commendations, all the plaudits to John Turturro, because that was...
He's a legend for a reason.
Incredible. I mean, my favorite lines from this episode were all from him. And Haja from Downtown Haja has inspired me to read out lines. So I'm just going to read 3 lines.
It's a very beautifully scholarly thing to do. Thank you very much, Haja.
I'm not going to do it as well as him, but obviously, yeah. And stop making Google eyes at her.
That was so good.
It was so crazy.
That was fantastic.
Everyone's confused.
My favorite was I wouldn't trust a word out of that Matterback's mouth, not even television. Oh my god! I can't even deal with the straight face. It was actually, there were too many funny moments in this episode. There were just too many. Like, Dylan was too funny as well.
To her while your outie wife rots away somewhere.
That killed me.
That was insane.
No, the anger, like the sheer anger, frustration, annoyance, and just willingness to throw all caution to the wind, because you can tell he knows like there will be consequences for this. He's like, nah, I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
There's business to rectify.
Yeah, and it's that feeling where you're in a group of friends and someone is lying to you and everyone, and it feels like you're going crazy.
Yeah, the gaslighting is wild, because she honestly took it too far. Like, she overplayed her hand. Specifically when it came to that scene where she brought him the snow seal. What kind of nonsense was that? Like, what was that supposed to be? And then he looks at her and he's like, yeah, you were very cruel just now. Helly was never cruel. Like, that, addressing it in that way, like, that was a power move on his part. And you can tell that she's irritated by that.
I think that's a great point that you raised in terms of why did she have to do the CEO? Because
She didn't
when
need
you
to do that.
when you go back to rewatch the episode, you notice not even just this episode, you notice that she's overcompensating. I know it's not obvious, but she's overcompensating. Whenever she's talking, she's not leading. Helly are kind of used to lead conversations. She's almost always following them behind. Whatever they say, she's smart enough to have a bounce back of the line. I'll give an example. When Mark S said, "Are you okay?" and then she says, "Oh, I'm just wondering where we're going," or the way she said that, she was trying to give him something that he expects to hear rather than something that she's actually
pandering
truly
because
feels.
that's what she's used to doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's used to pandering. And actually, now I think about it, I'm probably mixing it up because I'm trying to keep track in my head of all the signs that we had this episode that she was not who she said she was, because they gave us a lot, actually. I think Irving said that Helly was never cruel in the morning by the waterfall before he threatens collegial murder, as Milch calls it, which is just amazing. This is the tallest waterfall in the world. I'm just like, literally, when he said that, right, I screamed out loud, that's a lie. Like, that's just, and it's crazy because they would never know, right? But he just said, this is the tallest waterfall in the world. Bro, really? Like,
honestly,
the
if I
place you
didn't go
just
to
happened to
school,
bring us is the tallest waterfall in the world.
I'm just gonna put my hands up there and say, like, one of my favorite thing about this season so far has always been Milch's lies, and they're always hilarious. But I love that one particular one in episode 1 is somehow now kind of true in many ways. The throuple one.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's actually a little crazy.
Lies so freely, where are you getting this from?
No, honestly.
I love them.
But actually, wait, hold on. With the Helly signs, right? At what point did you guys first start to think, okay, I think we're building up to some kind of revelation or some kind of like her being thwarted in one way or another? Like, when did it start to become clear that, like, okay, now you're not even trying hard enough, like in this episode?
Honestly, I don't think it's obvious till she went by the waterfall. Because when she went by the waterfall, I then started to see she was, looking for that connection of being an Egan. Not looking, she already has the connection, but essentially this is a part of her history and she went to connect with it.
She was actually enjoying that place.
Exactly. Yeah. She reveled in it.
And here's the thing though. For me, I started to think this way right at the beginning. Really? When Irving is on the ice, right? And then Mark is like, he's like, do you want me to come up? First of all, like, Mark is like, well, yeah, don't just stay on the ice. But then he's now coming up and then he sees Helly. And he's like, Helly, where did you come from? And she says, I don't know. And I was just like, you liar. Like, just immediately, that was the moment where I was just like, okay, no problem. Because you can even see Irving's reaction to that. He's looking at her like, really?
Of course, really? Irving felt that way. But do you think that, like Irving, you were suspicious of her. So that answer of I don't know definitely raised red flags for you. Whereas if someone else, not me, but if someone else was thinking this is Helly, they might have just accepted it as, yeah, she was probably confused. She doesn't know how she got here. And she was probably answering she doesn't know how she got here. Because in reality, he did ask you, where did you come from? Like, you just, like, I saw Mark up the hill, so I knew where he came from.
You know what an actual person who didn't know where they came from would have said? They would have said, I found myself over here.
Exactly.
Like in this specific spot, in that direction that I just came from.
My point is, someone who's not suspicious of her, although I think most viewers are still trying to figure out, so they would be suspicious and they would have picked up on that. But like, from the perspective of someone who's not suspicious of her, I wonder if that moment might still, like, because for every moment that they raise a flag, it could still go under the radar. It's still like like what we were saying earlier. They've done enough throughout the season to keep people guessing, and this is the first episode where it's like she's losing. You can't keep pretending forever.
Yeah.
So like there are now plenty of points in this season where Helena comes out. Like we'll get to the marshmallow scene eventually, but like where Helena herself definitely comes out, and then Irving is able to pick up on that eventually and things like that. But I think they've done a really good job on keeping people divided so far, even up to that point. So to answer your question of when did I know, I'm not even sure if I think like Nido, I'm not even sure if I fully was paying attention to it until the rewatch, but I was more and more convinced that it was Helena over the episode over time, but I didn't know for certain. Or rather, what I should say is I didn't know for certain that we would get a reveal until like let's say the last 15 or so minutes of the episode. I was thinking, okay, we might be heading somewhere. I didn't think it would happen, but like at least maybe Irving would find out something, or she would reveal what she saw, or give them another story of what she saw, and then Irving would be like, "You're still fucking lying," or something like that. I thought there would be something like that.
No, I think the way Jon Stewart plays it is very good because he's not really responding from a position of panic. He's responding from a position of just pure like offense. Like he's offended. There's a sense of like, you're lying to me. I know you're lying to me. You're doing everything you can to convince me you're not lying to me. And kid, it's getting annoying. It's getting a little bit annoying. And that's just how he reacts throughout. And it makes sense that to me that he would react that way. And you know what? Let's get to that marshmallow scene at the campfire now.
Okay.
So they're sitting there, and he said that Milch at some point had said that there was going to be a recital, and I was like, reciting what? And then it turns out that he's going to be reading from the 4th appendix, which, I mean, at that moment I was just like, yeah, of course that was what was going to happen. Why did I think it could be anything else? But how did you guys process that particular scene? Not just from what Milchik was doing, or even from what Miss Wong was doing, because at this point I just thought, wow, like she's here too, and they're both wearing Montclair. And like at this point, right? I think Milchik has a lot to do here. But how did you guys feel about the way each of the innies was processing this moment, and how did that affect the way you were processing the moment?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think from my own perspective, I would be very honest to say I wasn't thinking of how the characters were processing it. I was thinking of how the show is doing an excellent job to give you that suspense that you only get in horror films, horror TV, horror shows. I think it was really excellent. I know you touched on the jackets of Miss Wang and the symbolism of them wearing white and all of them wearing black. I think everything about that scene, and to be fair, the episode as a whole was very much giving cult. And I think this is the first, this camp.
This was a cult outing, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I think throughout the season, we've not really gotten that cultish vibe. Obviously, we've gotten that capitalist trying to play down their digression. Is that the right word? Yeah. Trying to play it down. But now we've really gotten, this company is a very, very, very big cult. So I think that's how I was thinking about the reading of the book. I thought it was excellent. Yeah.
I love that you picked up on cult, because that's where I want to start. Like, if you just take a step back away from the story that our innies and outies are having this season, and take Severance as a show, and just how brilliant they are as social commentary in general, that seems a perfect example of how people tend to perceive or like how they assess religious texts. And they do it with a lot of things. I mean, literally last night we had basically a luminous listening speech at the Grammys, and I was like, Jesus, what is going on here? Well, fair enough. But you see these people, they come to terms with, they're reading the text obviously, and then they're making fun of the fact that apparently Dieter spilled his seed and died, and that seems awfully similar to a story that from a text I know in Genesis, and I was just like, okay, fair enough. But like, take it to the idea where some people see religious text and they're like, this is farcical and laughable, like Helly and Mark, and they're like, you can't seriously think this really happened. Some other people see it more as like, there's a lesson in here to be learned, but it's figurative, it's not literal. Like someone like Irving is literally asking like, did he actually die in that way? Like, he knows enough to believe in the lesson, but also to question. And then you have some people who are fully into the cult who are like, no, like, I can't remember the exact phrase Milch used about the truthfulness of it all, but in religion as well, you have in society, you have people who are like anything that makes it into the religious text is sacred and to some extent even sacrosanct. Like it must be purely divinely instructed and written in the way it was, the way like purely from God or whatever deity they serve, and I guess Dieter in this case. I thought that was a nice touch of just reminding us that, yeah, these people are a cult. And there's a very but like that commentary aside, you then go back into the actual innies and outs, or in this case innies, and what they're experiencing. And the other thing I loved in this scene is picking up on Mark's personality, because one of the things you guys were talking about in episode 1 was what you guys thought reintegration would do, and I did not agree with Chinedu, and I can't remember what AJ was saying, but I didn't agree with Chinedu though. Someone definitely said that it's like both personalities. You guys are arguing whether both personalities would disappear and a new one would emerge, or whether the outie would swallow the innie, or the like. And I was just thinking, none of that really makes any sense, because at the end of the day, all that happens is memories are split. We're getting sort of like an answer with observing Mark. Take the whole idea. If you look at innies as when they're severed, they still have the same traits as like the people on the outside, but they don't have those memories. So whatever behaviors, whatever reactions would be associated with whatever trauma or memory they have on the outside, it wouldn't be present in the innie. But then all of a sudden you reintegrate. You give that same innie the context of their personhood. So whatever feeling the person has on the outside probably does also then become part of the innie, because they're now the same person. You wouldn't suddenly have Mark be less like Mark S, less like Mark Scout. If anything, you would have Mark S be more like Mark Scout, which is what is coming off in this scene. All of a sudden, because I mean, we kind of vaguely talked about this in episode 2 and 3. Mark Scout is grieving, and he's kind of an asshole to people around him. And the condescension that comes through in the way Mark deals with people as Mark S in this episode, it's like, okay, so now I'm believing like the whole story of what will happen if someone is reintegrated. So I love that little element as well. And then also Helena not being, that was another clue for me, actually, a major one, that she wasn't her severed self. Again, she's able to, like, of course, Helly was always rebellious, but she still would believe the things that was told to her, like, oh, you can't take things, there's code detectors in the elevator. She was still questioning whether the security does anything, but she still kind of was malleable to a certain degree. But Helena, I don't even know at this point, like, was she laughing because she thought Helly would laugh, or was she just laughing because, even if she's Helena, she just thinks the story is ridiculous?
That's a good question, actually.
Like, what was going on there? It was things like that that made me think, like, because I know Mark is reintegrated, and it's making sense to me that his outside personality, because of his outside memories, would give him this same inside personality. Then I'm now looking at Helly that has a similar reaction. I'm thinking, you're an outie. You're definitely an outie. So I loved that. That was one of my favorite scenes the entire episode. That, and obviously the reveal scene.
Just to bounce off that, so I think from my own personal perspective, it was just shock at the story as well. Just I think that was genuinely insane. Like, if we take out the innies, that was genuinely crazy.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like the fact that they didn't get into the whole reintegration thing, and that's proof that they're confident in their writing, which is great.
Yep.
People who are confident in their writing are generally good writers. But the thing is, while they don't address it, and of course, if you're not going to follow up immediately on a cliffhanger, like, the episode that follows has to be like amazing, or as Bankole would say, exquisite. I feel like this fits that bill perfectly. Like, this was a very engaging episode. It's the kind of thing where, like, you start off confused like the innies do, but then you kind of get into the groove of things. We're going to probably I have a few thoughts on how they may have addressed reintegration in the episode, just because when Mark and Helly are together later in the episode, we see him get a glimpse of Gemma, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if that's them kind of nodding to us that like, is he reintegrated now in this moment, or does that happen later on? We'll have to see.
Oh, I have different thoughts on that
because
one.
I feel like this whole thing, this outdoor retreat and team building occurrence, ORTBO as it's called, happens on a weekend. It's so interesting,
Possibly,
right?
yeah. Why would
I think it probably happens on the weekend.
This show is so comedic on so many levels.
Because why would they call it this?
And Mr. Milch, I know we called what's Devin's husband's name again? Ricken. I know we called him the comic relief, but,
but
my
Milch
God,
actually
Mr.
is,
Milch,
though, isn't he?
even the way he sells some of the benefits kills me. He said there's stock room. No, sorry, the washroom is stocked of 4-ply tissue. I'm like,
and I was like,
I
supposed
wrote
to
that
what?
down. Luxury at its best.
As opposed to what?
Yeah, suddenly this camp is great now.
No, bro, like it's, you know what? I actually want to talk about Milch a bit because, like, my siblings have recently started watching this show, right? And one of my brothers was essentially saying, this guy has the worst job in the world. Like, he has the worst job because, like, he's essentially completely subscribed to Lumen's ideology. And he kind of acts like a dog when they need him to. And then sometimes he acts like an attack dog when he goes out and does whatever they need him to on the outside.
Okay.
And then he has to ride around on his motorcycle. Like, I've just been thinking, like, how did Milchik travel with a Lumen branded fruit basket containing a pineapple on a motorcycle? Like, because they just showed him with the baskets, right? We didn't really see him get there. So I'm just like, yo,
yeah, probably the same way delivery.
I mean, it's possible,
drive.
but at the same time, it's like, bro, this has to be a little difficult at night in the winter. But he does it anyway, right? And I think, in fact, speaking of pineapples, I think there was a bit of a callback to the season premiere when they were doing the pineapple bobbing, because when Irving was like literally dunking Helly, or I guess now as you can confirm,
that's true.
Helena,
Yeah,
and that was very well shot. Everything in the episode was well shot. They even did a great job of making it feel kind of different in terms of visual textures, because they had all these dissolve transitions that they don't normally have. Some of them creepier than others. I think those visual cues made sense in a way. And we even saw the title of the show, like Severance, coming up like in the sky, just to make us, really feel that we're outside. Because this is a one location episode. And it kind of feels in a good way like one long scene with different parts, because so many things are going on. From the waterfall that's the tallest in the world to Dylan's line readings being just really, really funny because he's just laughing. Like, there's one point where Irving's like, what did you tell them? He's like, nothing. What the fuck? That was just hilarious
in
to
this
me.
episode.
We need to have an episode where we talk about how characters say what the fuck in TV. I think he has one of the best what the fucks.
No, yeah, because like
Dylan?
you really feel his confusion. And of course, Irving doesn't trust anything anymore, right? We've seen Irving deal with this idea of, let me say, mortality for some time now. He started dealing with it when they took Bird away from him. Then, at the beginning of this season, he's wrestling it with it very, very hard. And Dylan kind of pulls him out of a hole when he's feeling a bit like ending things. And I feel like now with this episode and the way he throws caution away, he's almost like, I accept my fate because I'm tired. Like, he was already saying, I can't live like this anymore. And the way that thing happens at the end, it really felt like Milchik was ordering an execution. And he made it feel that way as well, the way he was talking to Irving. Like, he calls his name, it's like, Irving B, you've threatened collegial murder on another employee. Like, I don't even know if he probably would be acting like this if it was any employee that wasn't, Helena. But at the same time, like, the level of anger, the level of reprimanding, the level of consequence that he was bringing down the hammer, and he's just like, do it. And he told him to walk away. So obviously he doesn't see anything about anything. And then he's in the forest, and then, they dolly zoom him out, and then I guess he's gone forever. This is how we've seen how they terminate Audis, how they tell the Audi, like, yeah, you're fired. But now we see how they terminate Innies. And it's so painful, at least to me, because these people have spent their whole any lives hearing that death is not a thing that happens here.
Yeah.
And now you're literally terminating him in a way that is designed to feel like you are killing him.
And you
Like,
tell him it would be
and-
as if you never existed.
Exactly. And
that's-
he made it seem that way. And like it's just like, on top of the fact that this is an entire any episode that takes place outside, right? So it's like in like in Milch's mind, and of course he's here playing so many roles. It's the life of a black man in corporate, of course. But in his mind, he's probably keeping to the whole death doesn't happen at Lumen, because they are not at Lumen right now. Right?
Okay.
Even though they technically are, because this is obviously the center of like the source of their faith. This is like the trip to Mecca or something. Like it's weird in that sense. And
that's a good point.
He wants Irving to feel your life here is ending, which means your life everywhere is ending, and it is your fault because of what you have done, and I am the one doing it to you. Like that's very intense.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. Like everything you've said is spot on. And one thing I would shout out to is that I did feel that sort of military experience come out from Irving in this scene and this episode. It did feel, that code of conduct, the fact that she's lying, they've had an outie infiltrate their ranks, even the torture of putting her head, the waterboarding, not waterboarding, but essentially putting her head into the water. It did feel his military background was coming out. So yeah, I think your summary is perfect, to be honest.
And this is part of what I was saying. Like this part was also one of my the other favorite scene, and it's beyond the reveal itself. I mean, first off, even because you guys were asking about why did he keep mentioning his name Seth? We saw the payoff of like building up Seth eventually, but you guys, I don't know, on this podcast we seem to love an actor that can do a lot with their faces. And that shot
because
of John
those actors are good.
Yeah, exactly. And just that shot of John Turturro, like first, as Milch is speaking, he's deep in the idea, the consequence. He's like, I think because he knows what's coming, but I think there's also a moment where he senses the gravity of it, but then he goes back to smiling just before they, get him out. He goes back to smiling, knowing fully well that he's done his part. He smiles to Dylan, telling him hang in there, because that's the only person that at this point he trusts. He doesn't think Mark is evil, but he has seen Mark be stupid in his eyes. He's like, you're making Google eyes at the enemy. You're in love with her. You're like, you can't be trusted anymore. So he doesn't even tell Mark things. He goes directly to Dylan, and that's why he feels especially betrayed by Dylan in that other scene we mentioned, where he's like, so now it's 3 against 1. It's like, even you, it's very A2 Brutus kind of thing. And I think in that scene, every single person is telling us a lot about, what their conflict is going for. Because like you said, they all see it as, death. Well, at least they've been told death doesn't happen at Lumen. They're all seeing Irving being executed in front of them. None of them are okay with it. What's it called? Dylan is literally screaming, like Dylan, who has the conflict of the perks and everything and wanting to see his family again, very excited. He's literally so angry at Milch right now. He's screaming, leave him alone. Like I've never seen.
And he's screaming from a place of fear too.
Yeah, I've never seen Dylan that angry, and we have seen Dylan angry. Mark has this weird, because I feel like Mark, we'll get into Mark's conflicts bigger in a second, but Mark first has the reaction of, wait, that's Helena, and then he still comes back, because remember, this is moments after he's told, or just a night after he's told her, I don't care who you are on the outside. So I'm wondering how he deals with the information that actually, so the person I've come to investigate this company to find out what they're doing with my wife, and the person I just slept with, who I don't care who she is on the outside, actually does possibly have something to do with my wife's disappearance. That's a whole conflict for him, but he's focused on Irving, and you can almost see him driven to tears as well. So I'm thinking, how is this going to play out for them moving forward towards Milch as well? Because he did just kill their friend, in front of them.
Yeah, they're definitely suffering a loss, and I mean, of course, again, Irving knew what was coming. He's literally screams out, I'm going to kill her, Mr. Milchik. And he really
Yeah.
takes solace in the fact that he's been able to unearth this.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is happening for a reason. It's not without purpose, right? When he literally says, yeah, Seth, do it. It's like, yeah, I know you guys have been playing with me. Stop playing with me. I'm going to kill her, right? Like, even when she goes mask off and she's like, God damn it, Seth, just do it.
I'm sorry, that scene was exceptional, man. I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milchick.
No, that was great. That was absolutely great.
Oh my God.
Everything
I guess-
leading up John Turturro is so good with that. Even the way he questioned, he's like, Helly was never cruel. Then he comes up to her and he's like, who would have the power to send their outie to the 7th floor?
It was that was brilliant, man.
Like,
yeah, I mean, because it's not really that he just figured out and became absolutely certain
out
that
the evidence.
she's been her outie the whole time, right? He was able to do enough math to deduce that this person can only be an Egan. And for somebody who has revered the Egans for so long, right, this is such a turn for him. It's interesting that this would be his reaction because of everything that he's realized they've put him through. And now he can only feel contempt, right? So he acts on that.
That does bring me to two questions. One, again, we address the fact that we don't see the reintegration directly addressed at the start of the episode. Another thing that we don't see immediately addressed is the end of Irving's conversation with Felicia. So I'm starting to wonder, what else did Irving
learn?
Find out? Because for him to react, like, obviously we knew he was going to react in a strange way, but he's so angry throughout this episode. So what else could he have possibly found out that he's also so happy once she's revealed? He's like, my work here is done.
I do hope we learn it soon. Because we obviously don't see the end of his workday that day. So there's still some information for them to show us. And I'm looking forward to actually seeing that. When you consider the fact that the episode starts and ends with him, I'm wondering if they will do something similar in the next episode. Because Irving clearly he's been on a journey. He's been trying to find answers in a way that's slightly different from the way the others have. And I think this confrontation was something that was kind of inevitable if they were going to keep lying to him. But I guess now we're at a point where I need to say that we're probably going to get into some discussions of sexual assault. And I just wanted to put that out there for anybody who needs a second. We'll let you know when to come back. It will be in the show notes and also on the screen in terms of the timestamp for you to hit. But yeah, we probably need to talk about what Mark is going through in this episode. So Mark is trying to be the leader that he's meant to be. He's the department chief, of course. So he tries to move them forward in a lot of ways. When Irving is like, I don't trust this guy. And, he calls him a mountebank, which is another word for charlatan. Charlatan is such an interesting choice of words because that is specifically somebody who lies mostly to swindle people of their money. So I think he doesn't know what's coming, but he tries to lead them forward, right? They start to walk. They start to see their animatronic, maybe twin versions that are leading them across, which is all kinds of creepy because they don't really show us the faces clearly. Yeah. They see the seal, and, Irving tries to ask Mark about Helly. He's like, oh, what were you guys talking about? Because he's experiencing these doubts very deeply. And then, everything happens in the campfire and all that. And Mark is trying to sort of get answers from Helly in his own way because he's asking her all these questions. They're trying to figure things out and all that. And I feel like what ends up happening is interesting for a number of reasons. Number one, he's actually able to find intimacy with this person that he's been building feelings for. He acknowledges the feelings. When he's told about the Google eyes, he's like, well, he doesn't say much, but he's kind of like almost standoffish about it. And then later he tells her, I can make Google eyes at anybody I want. I'm just like, oh man, you didn't have to he's down bad now, right? And at this point, he's down catastrophic. So this is now a point in his life where he's experiencing something new again. So Mark believes he is being intimate with Helly, but he's actually being intimate with Helena. And it's assault in a number of ways because her entitled ass wanted something and took it. Like, it's like a royal picking a servant at the banquet. Like, it's very Westworld season 1, in fact, in that sense. It's almost like he's a host, right? So this is also happens to be the first real sex scene in the show. And it's coming out in this way. I think it was actually done very tastefully, to be honest. And we learn everything we need to learn without them making us feel overly uncomfortable. But at the same time, you do feel that discomfort because because at least if you're somebody who has an inkling that Helly is not Helly, then you're feeling a little uncomfortable for Mark. And then once you learn what's happened and you see the look on Mark's face when Helly comes back and he's like, oh my God, wait, what? Like, you can see that look on his face where he's like,
that is true. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and they don't say it much, but they make sure to show us because now we have a sense that he's realized so many different things on so many different levels. I remember when we talked about episode 3, I was like, you're saying all these things about Miss Casey, you don't know Helena standing next to you, right? He's probably thinking that now. And he's also thinking, okay, so who did I just share a tent with? Who have I been talking to this whole time? Who's been helping me look for my wife? Like, what is she doing here? Why does she want me? Like, everybody's lying to this guy on the inside and on the outside. He asked Cobell the same questions. Like, what do you want? Why are you doing this? He's now probably going to have the same questions for Helly inside. And we see him get that glimpse of Gemma, like when they're together in the tent. Is that reintegration? Like, I mean, obviously we don't know anything yet, and I'm curious to see what they'll do, but because like reintegration aside, like this is its own thing. Is that a memory slipping through? You know, is that Audi Mark coming through as well? Is that some kind of like, let me say, like evidence that it's actually been Audi Mark this whole time, and like it's really just he has both memories? It's hard to say, but at the same time, Helena kind of violated this guy in a way. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it was pretty messed up. She goes as far as obviously having sex with him to manipulate him. We see it even in when she talks to him about why she lied about her experience outside. She gives the reason that all of us were giving as to why she could be Helly. So she's obviously a smart woman. And I felt sorry for him. I think Ebube, you said earlier, I did feel sorry for him. You know, just a quick reintegration in terms of the conflict is about to have, and you know what's just happened to him, and you know the person that he thought he has been with this entire time. I think the Eenies, they're having so many realities getting shattered. So
yeah.
I agree with everything you guys are saying. I felt the same way when I was watching, especially when I was watching it the second time. I was like, God damn it. But I think it's interesting that, well, one, it would be you're of the opinion that you're not even sure if the reintegration has happened. But I feel like the way the end of episode 3 was shot, I think it is in that moment. It had like, we did see a unification of the brainwaves, we did see the unification of memories and stuff, but it does bring an intro. There's a whole thing I can get into as well as to what I think happened with the glitch in that scene, let's call it. But yeah, I think it's interesting you think that way. But like what Nidu was saying about her manipulating him to control like his, I read it that way the first time, but the second time I saw it more as the way we were talking about her being jealous of her innie on the inside and wanting to experience that. I do think there's an element of that as well. I do think Helena is actually, she's one doing the thing where she's trying to control the situation from the inside, but I also think there's a wild explorative side of her in quotes that also wants to experience things, and so was pushing forward with Mark wanting to experience that as opposed to just purely doing it to get him to do her bidding or whatever. Even if both those things can coexist at the same time, I think there's an element of both, is what I'm trying to express here. And I think on the glitch, I mean, since we're here, I might as well go in there. If I go with, my assumption was the reintegration did happen well, let's just say successfully. You can question why he's glitching, and there could be, one or two reasons. One, we already know, like this one, I don't have any evidence for this because obviously we're just assuming, but their offsites probably been 2 days. The way Regabi spoke about it, there's probably some post-op instructions to follow. Maybe him being offsite for this long means he hasn't taken some meds, so he's experiencing some glitches. But I'm taking back to when PT was experiencing glitches when he was having reintegration sickness, and there were always moments where, for example, he would glitch himself walking through a hallway in Lumen, and then he would come back to reality, and it would be like a very similar layout. And I love the visuals of those scenes, but I looked at it as, okay, so he's kind of like, it seems like memories are triggered by similar things. And you take it back to the end of episode 3 as well. The moments, as soon as the lines met, the moments that we were seeing were moments that were kind of like very, should I call it, adjacent is not the word, but these moments were very similar to each other, whether the same sort of question was being asked or the exact same question was being asked, he was in the same position, things like that, to signify the idea of unity. And it also opened up some questions as to why our memory is so similar, but that's a different thing. I took it more as triggering. And then I thought back to that scene, because there's this other layer of what Mark is experiencing. You guys questioned in episode 1 what people would feel. And I think Regabi was also trying to say, I can marry a version of you that is still in love with your wife, with whatever you experience. That's when he cut her off. We don't know what she was going to say. He cut her off and he's like, just do it. So I think there's an idea here where Mark, like Chinedu put rightly in the last episode, Mark makes this decision out of such huge, like this burning love for Gemma. Like, Mark is grieving so deeply that he puts himself through severance, and he's grieving so much that he decides to reintegrate as well. And what is grief if not love persevering, as we love to say? And then we come to this scene where it's like, that is a moment where if Mark has any sort of love for Helly, that is a moment where that is being expressed. And so if that is being expressed, that is potentially a scene where Mark would also be triggered because that same brain also has immense love for Gemma. So if this is a loving moment, it makes sense that he would glitch in that moment. And that's how I read that.
Okay.
What's a brave man to have sex in freezing temperatures, though?
Right. Well, your bodies will keep each other warm, apparently.
I mean, they were in front of a giant heater, to be fair.
There was that too.
And it was doing it for the first time as well. So, yeah, different levels of bravery there.
That actually, sorry, just as you said something, just on the ridiculousness of the story they told, in defense of the absurdity of it, I listened back to the story. And I think if you take things as not literal, there is, like, obviously we don't take it to be true, but the idea is Dieter undresses himself in the cold, wanks, and later on dies, like turns into the forest or whatever.
Is it confirmed that that's what happened?
That's what Mark and people interpret it to be. But when you watch it back and you hear them talking about how he's unleashing himself, they literally say he spilled his seed, by the way. They said he spilled his seed on the soil. They talk about his him being in tune, the music of the forest, his moaning of the wind, blah 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 blah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it is what happened. He saw his brother go out in the cold, take off his clothes, and eventually die from presumably freezing to death. And eventually the description of his eyes became this and his hair became this is more about the decaying of the body and not like an immediate reaction. But of course the innies don't, well, Hollywood, but like, of course they put it more like a biblical text would put it, like they put it as if it's like something that happened immediately, and then you're like, of course that couldn't happen. Just in defense of them, it could have been that, because the main thing to pick out of that story is Kier feeling this deep depression where before he finally tempered woe. And it's telling and it's beautiful that right after that we have Irving going through the exact same thing. Irving has been depressed throughout season 2, and so he, in his own subconscious, when he's sleeping in the forest, also comes to face with the image that Milch made sure to show them was the bride woe, and he had to temper, or has he tempered that woe? Because in the moment where he's killed off, you can say he's suicidal in the sense that he knows what's coming and he does it anyway, but he seems happy to be done with it. has he tempered Woe as well?
Mm. I mean, him seeing happening, I think it's a good shout. He did, yeah. I mean, we said it earlier. Like, he wasn't really bothered about it. It kind of sounds like he was ready for the consequences.
Mm.
You know, you wouldn't do that to an Egan if you weren't ready to switch off and be as if you never existed.
Yeah.
Like,
So I'm even looking at it like, because at first I just assumed that the book was fake and they made it up. Like, and I don't want to Milkshakes lies. But when I watched it again, I thought about, taking the text not literally, but taking it as something that possibly could have happened, even if Milkshake is like, it's true, it's exact. Is it possible that this is actually a fourth appendix that like is adding to the lore of what Lumen is? And then I hadn't even picked up on the idea of Henny reveling in the scenery. So when you guys actually then mention it as, oh yeah, like Henny went to take in the place, that's when I'm like, that would actually make sense. Like maybe the book is a real part of, maybe that part wasn't a lie. Maybe there was a secret book, but I initially assumed like they made this up. It took them to some random place called the Egan National Forest and told them that this was the biggest waterfall and the tallest waterfall in the world. I thought all of it was a lie. They're just like questioning that.
Yeah, there's not a lot that we can really rely on in terms of like truth, especially since Milchik is the one who's talking. Like Milchik is incentivized to make them believe things whether or not they're true, right? I think with like from Helena's perspective, right? She said that she and this is just on the topic of truth, right? She said that she didn't love who she was out there. And because I've been thinking about the fact that this is probably not Helly this entire time, I've been wondering if some of the stuff that she says is true for her, for the Audi, essentially. Like I've been thinking about, this idea that this could be like a bit of an escape for her. And everything she says essentially has some kind of double meaning. And this whole thing now recontextualizes the hallway staring session that they had in episode 3. They were just looking at each other for like a solid minute. That was kind of interesting. Yeah. I also find it interesting that not only were we right about the whole Helena thing, but we were right, or at least I was right about the existence of a reverse overtime contingency.
Oh yeah,
because he literally says, remove the Glasgow block. And I'm just like, wow. Of course they have a procedure for this. And it makes you think about how they all got there in the first place, right? Because they clearly had their innies dress up, brought there separately, dropped in different places. Like they dropped Irving on the ice, for crying out loud. Maybe they airlifted him, but they probably made, like, think about that. Like if you were Irving, like Audi Irving, would you actually get on this ice and they just say, okay, yeah, we'll wake you? Like it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. It's like, you're just going to stand on the ice, I will wake you. And then I'd be like, absolutely not. Are you insane? Like, we're not going to stand on any ice. But it is what it is. But I wanted to establish all that about truth and then about Helena and about Irving, because I specifically wanted to ask Chinedu what you think of Irving's dream and the presence of woe in that, considering the positioning, considering like who's sitting where, considering the fact that Bert is there too. Like, I feel like that's the one thing we should talk about before we close this off.
So don't want to open a Pandora's box here, but I have seen.
You can peek into it just a little bit.
Just a little one or two rumors that Irv might be reintegrated, but yeah, obviously we have the dreams, the military background coming through, just the sheer audacity of his actions. But I wonder who will represent, obviously, not wonder, but is it giving Helena, or are they trying to tell us something about the similarities between Woe and Helena? Yeah, I think I have some questions there.
Wouldn't it be more like the source of his woe right now is this idea that no one else seems to be paying attention to Helly versus Helena, as opposed to the show telling us Helly is similar to her. It's more like Irving's perspective of perceiving her right now is causing him great distress.
That's a good shout.
And you're thinking about this in terms of where Will was sitting? Because if we're looking at the little four-way cubicle, right? It's essentially...
Bert was also there.
Yeah, because from Irving's perspective, right, Mark is...
in front of him.
Well, Mark is basically like on his left, Dylan is in front of him, and diagonal to him would be Helly. So it would seem that Will was in Helly's position.
Yeah.
Right? And then Bert was in whose position?
If you're saying Bert was in Dylan's position, that would actually make a lot. Because you said Dylan's in front of him. That would make sense. And the idea that he sees Dylan as a friend, he trusts Dylan, but also, again, we're in his subconscious, and he also sees Bert as, well, maybe more than a friend. Well, not maybe, but definitely more than a friend. That's also why I didn't really put too much stock in, where is Helena here? But I just took it to be more like he's depressed at this point in time. And right now he's sleeping, and his brain is going to make sense of the things that he saw while he was awake. And one of those things was an image of a bride named Wo. So of course it showed up in his dreams with meaning, obviously, but I didn't necessarily go too far into it could be Helena, but that's how I would read it as Helena, more about it's caused this situation is causing him great distress.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Wo apparently told Kier that he enabled his wantonness. And I think that there's a level of wantonness that Irving takes on in this episode as things become very haphazard for him.
Yeah.
And of course, Helena is very different from Helly in the sense that Helly can be very frantic, but Helena has been trying to put on that level of chaos. And of course, we saw that she was studying Helly on the outside. Helena leads a different existence in the sense that even if she might be Helly on the inside, she's very powerful. So things tend to come to her. Whereas Helly's always thrashing around, Helena is very calm. Like we saw in episode 3, for example, where she was about to lead Cobell to the slaughter, and I still maintain that they were going to kill her in that place. Why 100% believe they were going to kill her. So yeah, it's simple and yet profound, because assuming everything Helena has said so far can be viewed as a double entendre, does this mean that we're going to start seeing some kind of redemption for her? Like now, where everybody is aware that she's been in both places. What's that going to do for her character? What's that going to do for the way that she operates? What's that even going to do for the idea of us seeing Helly from now on? What's that going to do for Milch? Because they already don't trust him, but now it's like, you were in on this.
Maybe she becomes what a PK is like. So a pastor's kid. She rebels against the institution.
Don't kill me. That's insane.
I didn't say that. I was joking, guys. I was joking. Please, any PKs, I respect you all.
There was something in my head.
Steer not from Kier's path unless you roil nature's wrath. Wow.
Oh God.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it did. I'm not gonna lie. Either she's such a great liar, or she seemed so genuine when she was saying
it
that.
Could be both.
Exactly. She says that in quite very vulnerable circumstances. She did not need to say that, by the way. Mark was going to trust her, whatever she said.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Earlier in the forest, Mark says, "We all know you had a bad time outside," which I felt like was similar to something Mark Scott would say. Made sense. And the camera pans to Helly as she observes that moment. Again, she's always just kind of like assimilating, learning about them, and trying to regurgitate what she thinks would happen. Unfortunately, this one doesn't work to her benefit because it tips off Irving. But later in the marshmallow episode, she uses the same phrase, "We all know," but then goes on to turn to him and very wickedly say, and he was lonely. And the sound changes a little bit, her tone changes, and it sounds very much like how she speaks when she's speaking to Cabell, or how she was speaking to Seth in episode 2. It's we all know that he's sad about birth and he's lonely, and that's when it's cruel. And it's like I just wanted to give Helly some praise for that, to just seamlessly switch back into Helena mode before going back to Helly.
My God, that's too much, man. Episode 5. Well, I can only hope that it's not going to stress us, but at the same time, I kind of hope it stresses me.
There's so much.
The story is amazing, but I guess that's a good place to call it. There's a lot to digest in this one location episode. I mean, this may be the most eventful one location episode I have ever seen.
It's my favorite episode of the season so far, for sure.
But yeah, thank you all so much for listening up until this point. We are having a great time wrapping up this season. We love reviewing it. We're going to keep going. We're going to be here for episode 5 as well, and definitely for episode 6 and onward. Definitely listen to the Invincible crew when you need a little bit of a break from your Severance fix, because Invincible season 3 is back, and we have a few other cool things coming down the pipeline as well. So yeah, stay tuned. See you soon.